You're listening to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcast on the midterm review of the current Multiannual Financial Framework.
In this podcast, we're going to talk money, EU money. The current Multiannual Financial Framework, which lays down spending ceilings for the period 2014 to 2020, is approaching review time.
Indeed, the Commission is expected to make a proposal for a review and revision of the MFF before the end of 2016. The question is, in light of the various recent crises and new political priorities, how thorough will this review be? And how big, if any, the modifications proposed by the Commission? The European Parliament has a lot to say. We'll give you a taste of it in this podcast.
Let's start by explaining what we're talking about. The Multiannual Financial Framework, or MFF, is a mechanism first introduced in 1988 to improve budgetary discipline, predictability of expenditure, and to ensure the smooth financing of EU policies. How does it do that?
Basically, it lays down the maximum annual amounts that the EU can spend in different political fields for 7 years. So the current framework was adopted in 2013 and covers the 2014 to 2020 period, which means it's review time.
Indeed, despite being the fifth of its kind, it is the first MFF to take the form of a regulation containing provisions for a midterm review that may lead to its revision. So all eyes are now on the Commission, which is expected to come up with a review and possible revision of the rules before the end of 2016. So how does this process work?
Well, according to the rules, the midterm review should take into account the changes in the economic situation of the EU 28 and macroeconomic projections. But it is also an opportunity for the newly elected EU institutions to reassess the political priorities and endow the MFF with renewed democratic legitimacy. So it also works as a sort of post-electoral review.
That's correct, and the European Parliament is very supportive of this idea, having an obligatory, genuine post-electoral midterm review of the Multiannual Financial Framework. But the review is also an opportunity for the Commission to call for a revision of the MFF rules and ceilings without touching on the agreed national allocations for the period in course. So what can we expect from this review? Let's look into it.
I would say there are strong reasons to expect the Commission to come up with a thorough review of the current MFF, with bold conclusions followed by a proposal for a revision of the regulation. What makes us think that?
The most important issue to be solved with the review is linked to the concerns about the MFF's flexibility and the adjustment of expenditure ceilings in the light of the various recent crises and the new political priorities. And the truth is that implementation during the first 2 years of this plan has proved extremely challenging. Why?
For three main reasons. First of all, because there was less money from the start, as member states facing financial constraints agreed on a lower level of resources than the Commission proposal and than the previous framework. The second reason has to do with the enormous backlog of payments the current MFF had to absorb. And the third is linked to the various crises that have hit the EU in the past couple of years.
The refugee crisis, the increased threat of terrorism, Russian bans on EU agriculture products, economic desperation in Greece, all these developments have dramatically pushed up spending in certain areas such as security and citizenship and global Europe, two headings where resources have been completely exhausted. And that's not all.
To boost frail European economies, a European Fund for Strategic Investments was established in 2014. The fund was partly financed through cuts in the Connecting Europe facility and the Horizon 2020 programme, as well as from the unused margins in the EU's annual budget.
To accommodate all these growing needs, the Budgetary Authority, which is formed by the Council of the EU and the European Parliament together, has already used all the special last resorts, margins and flexibility instruments provided by the MFF.
We're talking €3.2 billion from the contingency margin to reduce the backlog of payments, over €1.5 billion from the flexibility instrument to help manage the refugee crisis, and another €2.4 billion from the global margin for commitments to finance the European Fund for Strategic Investments.
So far, the spending ceilings have not been touched, but with migration likely to continue hitting the news, some fear the limits of the current budgetary plans can be stretched no more, and there's still 4 years to go.
The review is also an opportunity to reflect on the way the EU finances itself beyond 2020. For example, the possibility to finance the EU's budget with genuine own resources rather than national contributions, the duration of the next MFF, the possibility to create a separate Eurozone budget, as well as the recently developed trust funds, which raise important questions about the unity of the EU budget and the democratic accountability of these new financial tools.
So how does the EU go about reviewing the Multiannual Financial Framework?
Actually, it's a well-orchestrated play, and all three institutions, Commission, Parliament and Council, have a role in it. The European Commission must present its review before the end of 2016, and this may be accompanied by a proposal to revise the current rules. This will trigger the special legislative procedure, which requires a unanimous vote in the Council, unless the European Council authorises the Council to act by qualified majority, and the consent of the Parliament given by a majority of its members.
So what are the positions of the key players? Let's start with the Commission. The review of the MFF is high on the Commissioner's to-do list for 2016, though the actual date of its presentation is so far unknown. President Juncker wants to use this opportunity to further orient the EU budget towards jobs, growth and competitiveness.
And Vice President Kristalina Georgieva, in charge of the budget, also wants to seize this moment to propose a strategy for an EU budget focused on results, an idea strongly backed by the European Parliament. But what is the position of the Council?
Well, the Council is not expected to show its cards before the Commission makes its proposal. It has, however, started a debate on the future Multiannual Financial Framework, but considering that any amendments of the MFF require unanimous agreement in the Council, we shouldn't expect revolutionary changes.
So it's probably the Parliament who will play the most interesting part. Its ambition is to set the agenda and to be at the forefront of the debate, and that's already showing.
The reports on the preparation of the post-electoral revision of the current MFF, led by co-rapporteurs Jan Olbrycht and Isabel Thomas, confirmed the exceptionally difficult circumstances of the current MFF's implementation.
The report stresses that the MFF has already been pushed to its limits, so if Europe wants to continue responding to the challenges it faces, a revision of the figures seems unavoidable.
So the report proposes a comprehensive set of proposals on how to improve the MFF for the second half of its implementation, notably more money available to deal with the refugee crisis and the EU's external actions, compensation for the cuts in Horizon 2020 and the Connecting Europe facility, and the continuation of the Youth Employment Initiative.
MEPs also want any unused money to be automatically transferred to the following year's budgets, and to make it easier to use available resources and flexibility instruments in emergency situations. They also insist that the Commission come up with concrete proposals to improve the implementation of EU policies and programmes.
The report also looks at the post-2020 scenario, paying special attention to questions such as the duration of the future MFF, the reform of the own resources system, more budgetary flexibility and improvements to the decision-making process, leading to the adoption of the MFF regulation.
The Committee on Budgets is due to vote on this report in June, and the remaining MEPs will then have the chance to do so during the plenary session in July.
However, even if the parliamentary engines are starting to roar, the Commission holds the starting pistol, and no formal procedure can start before the Commission presents the review and any proposals for revision.
The question is, with the migration crisis nowhere near over, the emerging terrorist threat and the forthcoming UK referendum, will the review and revision of the current financial framework be up to these extraordinary challenges?
We'll be watching this play with ever greater interest.
You're listening to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcasts.